all you're doing is pulsing. So I would try to quit and come back again. Although it looks like everybody's having a little internet problem tonight. Okay, well, hey, we're hosting. So
yeah, the show must go on.
Part of the rule of Blab is just keep things moving.
Yes.
Keep it talking.
So there you go. Now, I will have to say, while I love Blab, I don't know how there's any way I'm going to monitor a Twitter feed.
Well,
it's hard enough to monitor what's going on in the chat bar, so that's crazy.
Supposedly, what I agreed to do with Jimmy was that he was sort of the host, and I was going to monitor the Twitter feed. And when the questions came up, I would announce them, and if some salient tweet came up, I'd kind of break in. So it's really intended to be a conversation between other folks, and I'm supposedly. We're load balancing the the multitasking here a little bit.
I think you're overbalancing the load is
yes.
My estimation. I think what we should be doing is maybe the healthcare HCLD our tweet chat. Then at the close of that, have people come into Blab and then really get going on the conversation.
Well,
that's
tried
what I think.
It's an excellent idea.
I don't know how I could even pay attention.
It's an excellent idea, and we've tried it several times the other way, and we thought we'd try to up the ante, and it'll probably be a complete failure, but it's a worthy experiment.
Absolutely. All right. Let me go find HCLDR. What is the theme tonight, Colin? I did not do homework.
It is dealing with death in healthcare. It's a topic proposed by Joe tonight.
Okay, so death in healthcare, as in helping healthcare professionals deal with patients, or suicide of physicians, or
all of the above. Although it's mostly to do with where's the questions here?
How to talk to patients. Yeah. Okay, cool. That's a great subject. I've in the past couple of weeks or months, I've run into a number of people who are wonderful about dealing with issues of patients who are dealing with life choices, and patients who are trying to figure out how to gracefully shuffle off this mortal coil, and it is not easy. And I will say it's I would have now that I know what this is the topic. It would have been a lot easier for me to be doing this over in the chat, because it's easier to be dispassionate and nobody knows what you're feeling. But when you're face to face and talking, I really like to think about what I'm going to say, and it's a little harder in Blab because you're like blabbing.
Well, isn't that the idea of Blab though? Is you're supposed to let the passion come through. You're not supposed to be.
But you have several options. If you use the URL at the top, then you can sort of craft your own message. And whereas if you click on Tell a Little Bird, which I'm about to do in a second, then it fills in a lot of default information, which is fine too.
But then I have definitely edited that because it actually seemed to be a little bit easier. Because, for instance, okay, so here's the egotistical marketing side of this. What happens is whoever are in the 4 cameras, when you push the tweet out, those 4 visuals are their at symbols their Twitter handles are pushed out. But if you want to get credit for you're here, you can go edit that tweet and add yourself. There's no reason why you couldn't do that. So if you were looking for a little marketing mojo, of course it's at 109 out of 110 edits. So somebody's going to have to get thrown out. But that's cool. It's all about spreading the good word. So.
All right.
And the other thing is it's also about sharing the space. However, right now, because we're having trouble with people's internet connections, I'm going to kind of sit here for a minute until Charles, you running the show, or?
I'm trying to get a word in edgewise is what I'm trying to do.
Oh, okay.
The first question is, I may have missed it, but I have it listed. And that is, how broken is the current end-of-life system? It's #EOL. In terms of palliative care? That's the question. And then the second is suggestions. And there are some folks here, I believe, who are much more knowledgeable than I am. And so I'm hoping to learn from others. And what you just described, Janet, is kind of definitely relates to that question. So maybe we could explore a little bit of the dark underside that kind of motivated your uplifting story.
Well, it's interesting. My parents are both in their 80s. They are incredibly organized people. and I have the piece of paper that says they've pre-ordered their end-of-life cremation in the cardboard box. I have no idea how much it costs, but they've taken care of everything regarding their passing, and I just have to show this letter, and somebody's going to come and get them, and they'll be cremated, and it's like the cheapest thing you can possibly get, which you still actually have to have a casket. But depending on the state, there are rules as to how simple that casket can be. Again, new things I'm learning. It can be cardboard, can be a plain pine box in some places, but in other places it's very legislated. And it is definitely an area that, politically speaking, nobody pushes that envelope. Nobody talks about undertakers and the amount of money that's involved, et cetera. Not that I'm trying to call out an undertaker, but it's definitely an extremely expensive process. So,
perhaps folks could enlighten me in terms of terminology and nuances. The difference between palliative care, hospice, that kind of thing. Anybody here have a...
That is not my expertise, and I will hop out. Anybody want to come on in and share that? I'm willing to hop out too. I see Natris. Go ahead, please, Melissa. Thank you for showing up.
I wasn't sure if you guys can. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I think the difference, I could be wrong, but I think the difference with hospice is that there's a terminal illness within a certain period of time, and with palliative, actually, I think it's more a chronic illness, and they're not trying to cure, but there's not necessarily a window of time when the end is in sight. I don't know. Actually, maybe a doctor. I feel bad. Maybe James knows.
That's my understanding too. But hopefully, did you catch that question?
Yes,
Jimmy?
yes, I did. And I think the question was, what's the difference between hospice and palliative care? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's my question.
So palliative care really doesn't, as I understand it, no time limits. With hospice, the doc has to evaluate and estimate that the life expectancy is 6 months or less in order to qualify. So really, there's not a lot. There's quite a bit of overlap between hospice and palliative care. So oftentimes, I've had patients where we sign them up for hospice. They actually perk up a little bit and live longer than the intended 6 months. So oftentimes we'll transition to a palliative care type of a mode. So there is a lot of overlay, but I think the main difference is really the estimated time estimate in terms of life left on this earth. So that's my understanding. In our community, we have a really great palliative care service as well as a hospice service. We have an inpatient hospice house, which has been funded. We've got a great program here. The nurses are fantastic. They work with inpatient, outpatient physicians, multiple physicians, nursing staff across the county, city here. So we're really blessed to have an excellent, and I think they can go hand in hand and work nicely. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go back to T1. I'm getting some feedback from someplace. Probably you, Jimmy.
How about now?
That's better. I think you turned your volume. Perfect. And the question was, I think, a little more ideological, perhaps, and that is, how broken is the current end-of-life system? Anybody have any opinions on that, either over here in the activity stream, or Melissa or Jimmy?
Well, my experience, I worked as an AIDS social worker for a while and worked with oncology. It seemed in the past quite broken because there seemed to be, people had a hard time broaching the topic. And in my experience, a lot of times the family and everyone sort of didn't want to give the bad news. And that if there was a mention that maybe the end was near, it was seen as giving up, that it would be a failure. And so people sort of viewed death as a failure. They weren't maybe trying hard enough. And so hospice would get initiated within a week or two of death. And so they didn't really benefit from all of the things that hospice could offer. That was my sense. But I don't know if it's the system or if it's a reticence in dealing with mortality, that people have a really hard time with mortality. And that when it comes up, I think it's not just patients and caregivers. I think it's also the clinicians. That's mine. I don't know if anybody else had a different impression. So I'm not sure if it's the system or that it's death in general and it's more existential, that people have a hard time with death, period.
Jimmy, are you?
Yeah, I'm working
right
on getting some headphones. My son just brought me some headphones, and I'm going to try to wear them to cut down on the. There you go. I'm hoping that'll cut back on some of the reverberation there.
And I'm looking for the next question, and in the meantime, I'm looking for a real home run tweet to interrupt. But other than that, I think maybe Jimmy, now that you're all technically equipped there, take it away.
Well, Robin, I just want to introduce Robin. She just joined us, and she's the author of the Cancer Olympics, and she may have a really good perspective on the conversation tonight. We're talking about end-of-life issues, Robin, and what are your thoughts about what you've heard so far here tonight? And I don't know, are you able to hear us, Robin? Oh, good. You can hear? I can't hear you, Robin. Can anyone else hear Robin?
No, we don't hear Robin.
Oh, no, we can't. No audio on Robin, but so, hey, yeah, there's Colin saying hello, Robin, as well. Oh, there you go. All right, try that again, Robin.
Hey, okay, I found the key. Haha.
Excellent. So I don't know if you heard my question to you, but tonight's discussion on the tweet chat is end-of-life issues, and Chuck's reading tweets as they come in, and we were talking about the difference between palliative care and hospice care. And I was just introducing you as the author of the Cancer Olympics, and just wondered if you had any perspective on the discussion we're having tonight versus palliative care and hospice care with end-of-life issues, and how well in your region of Nova Scotia, how well that's being carried out, and if there can be improvements, what they might be, and what the positives and negatives are in your community.
Well, I can't answer too much about Nova Scotia in that regard, but I can tell a little bit about Ontario, where my parents just both recently died. My mother from cancer about 15 months ago. My dad only 1 month ago. And she was 85. He was 90. He died of old age. As I said, died of cancer. And so with both of them, we the family arranged for palliative care to occur in the home. So that's kind of a fresh experience for me. Thank you, Natrice. And what I can see from my mother's experience and my father's were quite different, in that the superiority of the nursing care that he received was much, much better than what my mom got. And even though her condition was more, she was in far more pain and far more distress than he was. But what I saw there is that he was able to get 24/7 nursing care because he was a veteran in the home, whereas she had to rely on her 4 daughters to provide care with 1 hour of palliative care support from a nurse a day. And so we were ordinary people. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to lift her properly. We didn't know how to manage the, keeping her comfortable in bed. We learned a lot while we underwent the experience. But when I reflect on it, I think, gee, that could have been a much more optimal experience for all included, had we had more direction from medical personnel around what would have been best practice palliative care for her. And so what I can say is that both of them were determined to die at home. That's what they really wanted, and that was sort of our last gift to them both, to provide them with what they wanted. They didn't want to be in hospice or in hospital. Now, I can say in my community here in Nova Scotia, we do not have a hospice. So if you die in hospital or you die at home, those are the options here. And I think most of us would prefer to die at home if that were an option. Provided
now in rural West Virginia, oh, sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, hi guys, I'm so sorry. You know what? What's hard is it's hard to read the Twitter stuff and then come back. I was absolutely listening to you. There's an interesting discussion going on about again, I kind of brought it up a few minutes ago, but this general discomfort with bringing up the topic of death, and that it's sort of, some people I think equate it with failure, that you've tried and then therefore if they bring it up that you didn't try hard enough. And so people, I think if they're dying, feel like they can't give up, or maybe they want to, but their family doesn't want them to. So they are pursuing treatment that maybe they don't want to. And I think it's very loaded. I don't think it's a systemic. I mean, I'm sure the system doesn't help, especially when you're in hospice. You have to kind of sign over your Medicare in the US at least, but there is people have a really hard time with mortality. It's opening a door. You don't know what's on the other side. So I think that's scary.
Yeah, and from my own personal experience, my mother passed away just over 10 years ago in rural West Virginia. And in rural West Virginia, we were really blessed with an excellent hospice program there where she was able to make her needs known, and that was she wanted to die at home. She had end-stage renal disease from diabetes, and we had a great really a great team of hospice nurses coming out. And we also had some 24/7 caregivers that also helped as well. So we were, and that was over 10 years ago. So I think it's probably different from community to community. But I tell you, the hospice nursing care that we received for my mother, where she was able to be comfortable, die at home, was, I can't say enough about that program at that time.
Excellent comments, and I think there's a segue to the next question, which is Teeth 2, and that is, what is your view on present skilled nursing and how it meets or does not meet the needs of our most vulnerable?
I think it's probably local, regional, maybe statewide, maybe even difference from country to country. It sounds like, Robin, there's quite a bit of difference just from Ontario and Nova Scotia area in terms of hospice availability. But I've been lucky, at least in rural Great Falls, Montana, and rural West Virginia. Both areas have been, with the skilled nursing. I think hospital setting, at least in this area, and back in Morgantown, West Virginia, where my mother spent a lot of time, worked closely with primary care providers and also specialists and also the hospice team. And so I think in my situation, both rural states, rural areas, a decade apart, I think I've been quite pleased with the care and how present skilled nursing can and does meet the needs of these end of life situations. But I think I think it probably varies. So anyone else? Robin, any further thoughts?
I thought the nursing care that we had, both the small amount and the large amount, was skilled, but the small amount was insufficient. So that would be my comment, that my view would be there needs to be more.
I'll point out, I guess I'm breaking in and doing my job here. Sandra Woods, MTL, T2, says, quote, Canada is in the grip of a serious shortage of registered nurses.
I believe that.
You know what? Can I say one thing, though, that I think is important? Most of the time, in my experience, my mother-in-law and one of my best friends who died from breast cancer, the kind of care that they needed towards the end was not skilled. And so it wasn't covered. And so the family actually had to do a lot of, it was unskilled, which is somebody needs help going to the bathroom, someone needs meals delivered. Actually, the majority of that care, as a social worker, I know this, it falls on the families. It doesn't, you don't qualify for skilled nursing. Even if you're skilled nursing, it's basically a couple hours max a day. And that's not enough for somebody who's actively dying. That's not enough to care for them. So actually it becomes a real problem, because if you don't have the resources to pay for it privately, or you don't have family or community who can pitch in, you end up in a skilled nursing facility because you have there's nothing else to do. And that's a big fear that people have.
And I should clarify, with my mother's situation back in West Virginia, the skilled nursing level, the hospice nursing level, they would only come in several times a week for an hour or two at a time. So the majority of care was, as you say, Melissa, was provided by caregivers that we actually had to pay out of pocket for. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Melissa.
I think is there anybody else that would like to
does Natrice want to jump in? If Natrice,
if
you want
to No.
Here, I'll jump out, guys. Here. It was wonderful talking.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Are the financial implications.
And thank you to Joe and Colin, who actually were using the activity stream here, I think, to
Natrice. Yay, Natrice. Hey.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
And I can hear you.
Yes, excellent.
Wow, this is real weird. I can't keep up with the chat. There's so much going on. Hi, Robin.
Hello, Natrice. So great to see your face.
Charles. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Natrice. Great to see you. I'm glad you hopped on. So you have the floor. Whatever you've been listening all along, give us your viewpoint, because you're a caregiver. You've been doing this for years, and I'm really glad you decided to show up tonight, because I think you have a lot to share with us.
Hey, before you start, Natrice, Jimmy, if you keep an eye on the activity stream.
Yes, I'll do that.
Both Joe and Colin actually, just inserted that T2 question in there. And so I'm going to step aside, and if anybody wants to take my seat, that is fine too. But I will keep an eye there and look for the T3 and the T4. And you're doing a great job, Jimmy, and I look forward to listening to Robin and Natrice and whoever is brave enough to occupy my a slightly warm seat.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for my technical I was out for the first 10 or 15 minutes trying to get in, and thanks for taking care of things while I was getting everything figured out. So
I think I need to click on an X here. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Natrice, but I clicked on the X and nothing is happening.
Hey, Chuck, I just want to say that I keep seeing these topics happen. And every time I see them, I keep hoping that something will come from them. But so far, I don't. The big issue is money and time. And there's not enough staff. And for 10 years, I was in long-term care, and palliative care was something we tried to provide, but we couldn't take care of our living patients, never mind our dying ones. And it was an awful experience for caregivers. And I would really like to see something change. It doesn't matter which side of the border you're on. There's issues. I know some countries seem to have a better setup, but here in Canada, people are just put in hospital and given drugs, and that they're lucky to have that, and they really need family to be their caregivers. If you don't have family, you have nothing. I'm sorry, but I watched it. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's tough.
It is.
Whereabouts in Canada are you, Natrice?
Well, I'm in Northern Ontario, but I worked near in Trenton for 10 years in long-term care in a couple of different homes. And we actually had a palliative room in both places. But in the second place I worked, they took the palliative room away because they needed to use it for a paying customer. They couldn't afford to keep that bed empty for someone to die in, which that's a lack of dignity for people at end of life. So
it wasn't a dedicated hospice. It wasn't a hospice dedicated to end of life. It was a long-term care facility where people.
Yeah, long-term care facility. I've not seen any hospices or end of life places. I don't know where they are, there are certain small hospitals that give incredible care, and then there's others that don't give any. And long-term care facilities, Jimmy, you probably know this, they're just trying to take care of everybody. And I can remember trying to tick off the sheet that I gave mouth care and turn somebody, and I knew that they needed a whole lot more from me. They needed their hand held, someone talking to them. The music kept going. Oh, it's an awful feeling to not be able to adequately care for people. Hi, Melissa. Yes, it's very hard on the family, very hard. I'm also a family caregiver, so I understand.
Well, I'm seeing if Nancy might want to jump on. She said, Nancy, when I worked on an oncology floor here in central New York, we were very good to our comfort care patients. So, I'd like to, if Nancy would be, okay, great. We'll go ahead and hear from Nancy's perspective. Now, she's from Buffalo, New York area. I interviewed her on my first hosted blab, and Nancy's working with a great application with, I think, a lot of life care issues that he's developing right now with a lot of educational information. And Nancy, go ahead, and if you'd like, go ahead and give us your perspective.
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't been with you from the beginning of this blab, so okay. I kind of jumped on a few minutes ago. I can just give you my perspective. I was an oncology nurse for over 5 years, and I can tell you that my comfort care patients were my favorite. I just loved being good to them and helping them through that last part of their life, because I truly feel that every part of your life is important. But I can also tell you that I've been helping care for my grandma, who is 98 years old. We brought her home from a nursing home because it was absolutely awful. And we didn't think she would make it a month, maybe 2, and it's been over a year and a half now. So the care that we get is through a private service, but the caregivers that were given to help with her are, I don't want to say anything bad, but they could be better.
Qualified for what they're doing, or is that what you mean?
They're qualified, but they, I don't really know what to say. I just wish that there was more initiative taken, I guess, because my mom is 70. So my grandma lives with my mom. My mom is 70. And she doesn't like to rock the boat. She doesn't like to, tell anybody what to do. So then, we have these caregivers who are there. So, my grandma's safe. But at the same time, she could be getting much better care. You know what I'm trying to say. So she's absolutely being kept safe, but I feel that there could be a lot more initiative taken to make her life better while they're there and more fulfilling. So that's my view at this point.
Okay, T3. This is the tweet chat that's going on right now with the HCLDR tweet chat and Wareflow. Chuck, just the third topic is, what experiences do you have to show you have a new way to handle end of life and treatments and approaches? So what experiences do you have to show you have a new way to handle end of life and treatments and approaches? And I think, I don't know if this is really new or not, but I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but in our community, we got a lot of donations, and we have a really nice, and I think lucky to have a hospice house where it's an inpatient hospice house where patients can spend months there if need be. And the rooms are set up in such a way that it's easy for family members to stay there with them as much as they want. There's a community area that there's an area to cook, kitchen, a dining area, and all the really types of things that are needed during end of life. So I think as a community, we're really blessed and lucky to have a facility like that. And this oftentimes patients can transition either from home if it's overwhelming for family members. It can also transition from the hospital or nursing homes, or back and forth. So, I think we're probably better suited than other communities. So we're really lucky. But a lot of that was due to donations that we're able to have a facility like that. So that's not terribly new. It's been around, I think, for about 7-8 years, I believe, maybe longer. But I think that's one of the better experiences as a physician, working with families, end-of-life issues over the years, having that as an option to help ease into that phase. And Janet, I'll go ahead and add you here. Sorry about that. Okay.
I can't hear her.
Okay. Yep. We can't hear you, Janet. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
How about that? 1, 2, 3.
Yes. That helps.
Push the button when in doubt. So I had shared before some folks were on the blab, my cousin glioblastoma. They were here in February, and I think from early on knew that it was going to be very difficult. So they were very, very openly talking about his passing early on without fear and being very brave. And it was really an amazing process. But there were a couple things that about the way it was handled was so non-traditional and really, or maybe extremely traditional, that we maybe need to think about. When he was nearing the end, he was at home throughout. However, my cousin was caring for her husband, 24/7.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah. I'm not sure either. She lost. Yeah, this is, as Blab is still in the beta phase, so we've all encountered some issues. I think, Nancy, I mentioned having difficulty getting the video started with you, but you were able to figure that out when I had my first hosted Blab. Robin, we had some problems at the end of our Blab when we worked with Robin, and I was trying to get her back on, and it just sort of ended. But we actually had a pretty good. Oh, I got to get Chuck in here. Okay, there we go. Chuck's coming back here. But yeah, I think this is a really great medium, but we're still working out all the quirks. This is kind of a difficult subject to talk about.
Can I?
Chuck, go ahead.
Step out of my, just watching Twitter and cutting and pasting into activity streams. I always look at things. People make fun of me for this, and I don't mind. It's my brand, and I'm really interested in workflow. And, and basically all human activity, all purposeful activity involves to series of tasks, consuming resources, achieving goals. And of course, as an engineer, you build systems in factories to automate that stuff. And to some extent, you see that kind of technology in healthcare. And the two things that I did a little bit of Google searching on workflow and palliative care in hospice, and the company isn't here, but I came across a company called MetaLogics in Nashville, and they use business intelligence and statistics and analytics, and I don't know enough about what they do, but part of their pitch, first of all, they describe themselves as a home health analytics and workflow technology company. So when you talk about workflow technology, you're talking about handoffs and collaboration and cooperation, but with some amount of structure. So you may have care pathways that are encoded in various ways in these systems. But there was a blog post there which reminded me of several of the personal stories that folks told here. And that was the nurse who talked about, even though she had a great deal of experience dealing with end-of-life situations, when it came to her own family, she felt guilty because she felt that she felt overwhelmed and kind of sucked in, and it was difficult to deal with sort of the emotional, distance aspect. I mean, too close, not close enough, whatever. And this company has sort of fascinating tagline in which they say, well, using the evidence-based and the analytics and the data about, who survives the transition to hospice versus who should be on palliative, and using the technology to make it less painful in terms of the, just the tasks, knowing what to do, all of managing all that stuff that just, creates an enormous hassle factor. And I thought that was an interesting. So no, I don't think that technology is the silver bullet to solve all these palliative problems, palliative care, and hospice and end of life problems. But I always sort of look for that, and I thought that was an interesting angle. And what the thing I got out of that, and I'd be interested in, is this idea that they're saying, well, because by having the data on what works and what doesn't work in terms of the transitions out from the hospital through palliative care into hospice, that takes some of the emotional stress out. Now, obviously a lot of people are very, very into getting more and more data. I'm kind of more focused on the workflow side, but there's a fit between the two.
That's an interesting idea that technology would actually be ultimately soothing and more humane in this process if it can help with the sort of predicting what makes sense, what's efficacious, what results in better care, better pain control, better healthcare generally for end of life.
And the other thing was at a previous healthcare leadership tweet chat. It had to do with what is the most important of non-EHR work data? What is the most important non-data outside of EHR? And I wrote a blog post about it, and I said that the life flows, data about the workflows out in the world, which relates again to these transition to home and to institutions that aren't part of the EHR system. As an industrial engineer who went to medical school, I tend to think in terms of time-stamped data. So you have a set of events and they're time-stamped, and you can do all kinds of and wearables and Internet of Things is going to give us lots of data like that. And I kind of think about what if we had enough data and it was dense enough and we could map out all the workflows, of the of all the end of life workflows, including the life flows. I mean, the stuff that the anthropologists study. The yes. Urban anthropologists. People think anthropologists go study the tribes in the Amazon. Well, no, they also go into households and they keep diaries, and that's the kind of data that we need about the end of life to help us. Give us ideas, grounded research, but then also specific data to sort of measure the performance of various prototypes or whatever. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, and it does. And then I also think it comes back, and it may be related to what you're describing, Chuck, but it's probably more. I'm just going to say it a little more bluntly, and I'm very fond of Canadians for some reason. I've got several of my favorite Canadians right in front of me. I've got Natrice and Robin, and I thought Annette might show up, and Colin. But one of my favorite Canadian heroes is William Osler, and I think it really just comes down to his mode of practice, and that's just sitting and listening and just teasing out, not necessarily teasing out, that's not the right word, but figuring out what the patient wants and what the family want, and then to make that happen. And then having a good nurse talking about some of the workflow issues Chuck's talking about and get it done as quickly as you can or efficiently as you can for the needs of the patient first and foremost, and the family needs. So I think it just comes down to good old-fashioned listening and respecting wishes. And hopefully being able to achieve that and getting them in places where if they want to die at home, if they'd prefer to be in the hospital setting, nursing home setting, hospice house, whatever, and try to make that work as best as you can. And let's get Natrice on here. There you go. All right, Natrice. Natrice is back. So I hope that makes sense.
By the way, Natrice, thank you very much for tweeting out the screenshot of the blab on Twitter. Thank you so much.
No problem. I find it fascinating, and I'm trying to impress people with the point that we are all real people. We are talking about real issues, and there we are all on the screen together with opportunities to connect that aren't afforded to us because travel is difficult and expensive. But I'm so excited about being part of this.
I'm sorry that this is slightly off topic, and I am watching for Teeth 4. But Natrice, in a minute, tell us, you can't do it in a minute, but tell us about your visit to Stanford.
Oh, you went to MEDX?
Yes.
I did.
Oh, Alice.
Bravo.
Yeah, you know what? I'm blown away. I can't even talk about it. It's so huge. I tried to blog about it, and I've read some of the other blogs. Just being there was like being, I think I said it was like being on a cruise ship in Disneyland all at the same time. and I mean, it was for healthcare and patients and doctors, and there was fine food and support and education and new things, 3D printing and microsurgery or whatever it was.
And I think this is a lead-in to you, Natrice, because of your visit to Stanford. Question number 4 is, how can we recreate end-of-life experience in a way that puts patient care front and center? Anything you can bring back from your experience there?
I can't tell you how many people spoke to me and said that they thought about their parents and their loved ones who lived a little ways away, but they always put it off because it's next week or next month or whatever. They have other things to do, and they've left their family and loved ones sort of sitting there waiting for time with them, and they suddenly thought about the importance of every day and how you make people at end of life.
I watched your Periscope. There was a line in there where I think you said waiting over and over again. It was very dramatic, and I could tell the audience was quite affected by it.
Yeah, I was so honored to be part of that. There are so many stories, and mine is just one. And
I delivered my 4th question, and I'm going to step out. And Colin, and Jimmy, you stay in. So I'm going to take off.
Come on, Colin.
Come on, Colin. All right, let's go ahead and add you there.
Look at your 3 Canadians.
There he is.
It is. You're outnumbered, Jimmy. 3-1 Canadians here.
Uh-oh. I'm close to the border, though.
You're a virtual Canadian. We'll give you that.
I can see the border.
This is certainly an interesting discussion.
You guys.
It's I gotta say, it's a bit surreal doing the Twitter thing and then trying to do the blab at the same time and hearing you guys in the earphones while this is all happening. So it's been fun. I gotta agree with Natrice, on this whole T4 thing. I mean, I don't know if we really need to recreate end of life care. I just think we need to educate people on it, because we arrive at it sort of when it happens, right? When you're trying to make all these decisions in a very emotional time, you're probably not thinking straight. To me, it's just, a combination of educating the public around what's available. It's also allowing and funding the folks who give palliative care and the folks who care at home the time and the funding to do it, because it would save so much money for the healthcare system, yet we don't do it. So baffling to me, and I agree with you, Natrice. I just don't know why we keep talking about it and nothing ever happens.
Well, I'm 66, guys, and I'm staring it in the face. I'm looking into the gun now, and it's not about 50 years away. It can be 20 years away. It can be tomorrow. and that can be true for anyone at any age. But when you get sick or when you get old, there should be something better than just sticking you in a hallway somewhere, putting you in a wheelchair and folding you up and changing you every 3 hours or whenever they can get to you. And I'm sorry, end of life, it's not happening, and it needs to.
Yeah, and I think it needs to have, definitely, it needs to have dignity, and it needs to have the patient's wishes, and the family needs to be surrounded by the dying, patient. And, in the best of all worlds, if that could happen, that would be great. And I realize there are communities that don't have some of the, and we're just darn lucky here. But Natrice, I hear you, and it's really frustrating to see those kind of situations.
As someone who went through it recently, I can say that it was quite a privilege to assist both my parents to die at home, and that in some ways I wonder if we underestimate the value of it to the living as well. That it's something that has an inherent psychological, spiritual value for those who survive the disease. So, and that's a whole health benefit or a whole health angle that we might also want to think about when we think about cost benefit. So, for example, if people are able to assist their parents to die or their loved ones to die comfortably at home, does that lead to a life that has fewer regrets on that score? And by virtue of that, is your quality of life somewhat higher than it would be otherwise if you have to watch your loved one die, as Natrice says, in the hallway under those a non-ideal circumstance. So,
well, Robin,
factor in that living also.
I think that's an excellent point about the living, because you just triggered a memory, and it's been over 10 years ago when my mom passed away at home. But you're right, I was able to lay in bed with her when she passed, and I was able to hold her, and I figured, she brought me into the world, and I was able to do that, and that was a very special moment for me. And I haven't told a lot of people that, and here I'm on Blab. But it was a very human, necessary moment that was needed, and we were as a family able to hold each other during her passing, and it was much needed for the living as much as for the dying, I think. And I think you make it a very excellent point, Robin.
Also.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just want to say one thing, that virtual hospice was mentioned tonight in the Healthcare Leader. And I'm one of the people that writes notes back to people. And honestly, being able to support someone from a distance is so valuable. And thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, virtual hospice. I was just going to say, shout out to Colleen Young on that, right? Another Canadian. We got to bring her into this too. No, but Natrice, just tonight I'm learning. I didn't even realize having a funeral at home was an option nowadays. This is how far we've come, right? And when my father passed away years ago from cancer, I at the time hadn't done my homework and learned about all these options at home. And so we went through sort of a non-ideal ending at a hospital with him. But now, having been on this chat, having learned from people who end of life chat and others, there's so many more options out there. And I just feel, as a marketer, we haven't done a good job marketing this to everyone, right? We need to do a better job here, because it is, in my mind, a very viable option. It should be the option of a default choice, as opposed to, trucking folks off to the institutions.
Can you hear me over there? No?
Yes. Is that you, Natrice?
No, it's Robin. Something. I've got the funny green bars have come for me again, so I guess that's the end of me.
We can see you. You're frozen, but we can hear you, Robin. We can hear you. So if you want to stay on and talk, go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, I can hear you, Robin.
Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
I'll keep talking, I guess. Anyway, I can't see you at all. This is what happened to me last time, Jimmy, when we were.
Yeah. But we can hear you wonderfully.
We lost audio last time too, so we're getting there.
Yes, getting better.
I think we just broke the lab, guys.
We broke Vlad? Is that what happened? We broke him with HDLDR? That's awesome.
Uh-oh.
I like it. Well, I'm gonna drop off and see who else wants to join in on the seat. But this has been great. I mean, I love it. I'm gonna stay on.
Thank you, Colin.
Oh, bye-bye.
Yeah, come on, whoever wants to jump on, please jump on and give it a go. And Robin, we can still hear you, and Natrice, we can see and hear you. So, Robin, are you talking? You want to go ahead and talk, Robin?
No, I can hear you, but
good. Okay.
Do we have a T5 to discuss?
We don't have a T5, I don't think. So we've gone through topic 1, topic 2, topic 3, and topic 4. So I guess we've gone through all of the topics. But yeah, but let's, we can, if you guys want to keep blabbing, talking, that's fine with me. So. And Melissa's back. Hi, Melissa.
Hey.
All right. Well, oops, what was that?
I have a question. Oh, can you guys hear me? That's so funny. Okay. I have a question. What if we ask people, because really what this is about is helping people have a good death. Meaning, not that, if that sounds macabre, but rather, how do we help people? What does that look like? Is it peaceful? Is it loving? Is it meaningful? Like you were talking about you with your mother, like that's beautiful. And that should be a goal, almost like to kind of wrap everything up and kind of real closure. So I think it would be interesting to ask people when they think about what a good death would look like, what does that look like? And then how do we support that as a system and medically in every way?
This is Robin. I'm just going to add to that I think that there needs to be more comfort in talking about this very issue with the dying. And as a formerly dying person, I can tell you that I wanted to talk about this with my family, but people did not want to talk about it with me. One of my own patients had the misfortune, her daughter died of a brain tumor, and the daughter was saying to her mom, I would really like this for my funeral. I'd like this kind of thing done. And the mother would just want to scream and run out of the room. She couldn't bear to hear her daughter talk about her own funeral arrangements, and yet that's what her daughter needed her to do. So, there's a disconnect between the dying and we the living who may not be ready. Either side may not be ready for the conversation, but I'm liking what you're saying, because I know that when the dying person is ready to have that conversation, it's really wonderful to have people who do want to say, I will take care of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think that, you bring up a really interesting point that you wanted to talk about it. And a lot of times the patients or, the people that I worked with were open to it, but their family, it was too painful. It's very emotional. And the idea of it's scary. It just brings up a lot of emotions. And in a way, for me as a social worker and a therapist, when people don't know how to handle intense emotions, whether it's sadness or fear or despair, then that's why they don't want to talk about things that are going to evoke those kind of emotions, and they don't know how they're going to handle those emotions. So I think we just have to kind of consider that as well.
Yeah. So how we go about making it more comfortable? What are the settings in which conversations like that happen? What are the environments that's most appropriate for them? Is it in counseling offices? Is it in hospitals? Is it in doctors' offices? It'd be valuable to know, what do most families value and what do most dying people value on that question. How do we get that conversation started so that everyone's needs are met what's the right setting for that, and who are the right facilitators.
You want to hear an interesting story? I mean, and I think that it goes in and out. Actually, I had 2 patients who were my psychotherapy patients, and they were dying. And when they weren't really sick, they knew they could talk about it, and they were very open. But as it got closer to the end, actually their doctors started looping me in because they had signed releases, and the doctors wanted me, you know, because the patients who'd been so open as it got close to the end were very scared, and they couldn't, as open as they were, they couldn't talk about it anymore, and their doctors wanted them to because they needed to make very important decisions. So it was interesting for me to see these people who were so willing to talk about it and were so open, and then suddenly when it came right down to it, when they really needed to make important decisions, they really struggled with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the answer is. I mean, I think just continuing to, I don't know. And it might be a bigger issue, meaning it's more cultural too, because I think in Asian cultures, it's different because they view life differently and death differently. I don't know. I'm trying to think about it.
When you say culture, I also kind of wonder about religious traditions too. You know, when my I remember when my mother died, our family is comprised of a whole bunch of different religious traditions. So the Buddhists wanted one thing, and the Christians wanted one thing, and the atheists wanted one thing, and it was there was no common. It made me think, gee, can't we just all be Muslim for like a day so we could all agree on some kind of path forward? But it really made me wonder about the value of people having a shared perspective on how these things should unfold, how funerals should be, how should be memorialized. With that, the plurality of our approach to our lives is great, but it also comes at the cost of all kinds of collision at these really key and, as you say, high emotion moments.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I never, it's only in the last year where I see the real value of funerals, not memorials, but funerals right after people die. Because a couple friends of mine died and they had memorials, and it was right after they died. I had this, I really wanted to be around other people who loved them and where we could talk and process it. And I think funerals provide a way of like emotionally processing and sort of the people who are living to sort of get through that. And when you don't have that outlet, like a month later at a memorial, I don't know, it was very strange. Anyway, I don't want to get off topic, but I just wanted to throw that out there as it relates to culture and how different people relate to it. So,
no, I agree with you. I think sometimes, you know, seeing the body in a coffin. I know the first time as a kid, you know, going to a funeral, not any of my relatives, but there's something to that, I think, versus, you know, the body not being there, say at a memorial. So, and it's kind of difficult to talk about, but I think personally for me, I think seeing at least my relatives in coffins did help with closure. That was for sure. My grandfather on my maternal mother's side, I had teeth that I saved as a kid, and I put some of those teeth in his coffin, knowing that'd be part of me to be with him. You know, so that doing those kinds of things that can help with the closure. So I hear what you're saying, Melissa.
Yeah. And wanting to kind of, that closure becomes an important part of it. I think having a sense of closure and what it meant to have that person in your life. And it's like in therapy, closure is very important. And I think closure in every way, to like with you, with your mother, you know, to be able to sort of, I just think that's beautiful. That it can be a very beautiful, meaningful thing that she, you know, that it was a blessing that you were able to do that for her.
It wasn't like a huge weight was lifted. You know, I had this huge weight, and it was just, as soon as she passed, I just felt this, it's strange, but this joy, you know, it was really a strange feeling. And I felt guilty for feeling that way, but it was a true feeling. And it's hard to talk about, hard to describe, but there was a certain weight that was lifted, and I knew she was in a better place. And that she wasn't suffering anymore. So,
and that she was at peace. And then, okay,
Yeah.
you know, I think it's, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, gang, I have to go eat dinner now. I'm on the West Coast. So.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thank you
wonderful.
for your
I love this forum. It's fantastic.
Excellent.
So,
good.
I'll be back next week.
Great. Thank you.
Are you doing this every week? Is this
I
going to
don't
be a week?
know. It may be. we may have started something, but I'm going to bring Colin back, see what he says.
I was gonna say, Jimmy, like you've started a trend. Look how many people are just sort of hanging around here. This is gonna, as if the chat wasn't fast enough. Now we're gonna try to navigate this plus the chat. It's gonna be great.
I can never keep up with the chat, so this works a lot better for.
Yeah, you're not alone. That's the common comment about HCLDR, right? It's just, it happens so quickly. So many comments fly through. You can, barely keep up with it. I could barely keep up with this that was going on, but yeah, I mean, this is really good. I mean, everyone's been sharing stories, and Jimmy, as you're just saying, like you shared something that you haven't shared before, yet we do it on social media. I think, I have never experienced virtual hospice, but I can imagine that if you used a forum like this to remotely talk to people who are in need of that service, I mean, I won't imagine, it's probably not as good as in person, but you imagine the uplift that someone would get through something like this if applied to the sort of palliative care and virtual hospice world. I mean, it'd just be amazing.
I completely agree.
I mean, has anyone tried? Does anyone know? Has anyone tried that? I mean, is this a? I mean, maybe not blab, but has anyone tried this sort of, the tele virtual hospice thing? I've never experienced it. I don't even know what it's like. But
I know that Dr. Kraken does palliative care, but I don't know about hospice care.
I just think it would be fascinating to see an example of that and how effective it is, because we're kind of the converted here, right? We all enjoy social media. We share very openly on social media. We learn a lot from social media, but for people who don't go use it on a regular basis, I wonder whether they would have the same kind of level of interaction that we kind of have when we interact with our friends online.
Well, I noticed just working with a lot of older patients that they absolutely love technology and they want to use it, but they just usually don't have someone to show them how to use it. So I feel that if you made it simple, and easy, that they would absolutely use it. I truly feel that way. What are your guys' thoughts?
That's my experience with, I saw something on Twitter earlier today, a big myth buster where the 50 to 70-year-olds are afraid of social media and their computers, their telephones for connecting, interconnectivity with conversing with other folks. And the myth is that the younger folks are more into the technology than the older folks. And there was an article, and I didn't actually read it, but it was busting that myth, saying that older folks are indeed interested in the technology and will use it if trained, like you're saying, Nancy. And that's been my experience with, I've got an elderly population in my practice, over 40% Medicare, and I've got 3/4 of my patients using the portal, and they really day in and day out tell me how nice it is. So it's simple. My nurse trains them, and I think you're right. If you can make it simple, offer it to patients, they'll take advantage of it. And I think actually the older patient will take advantage of it more so than the simple, younger, healthier patient, quite frankly, in my experience.
I agree. I mean, I've had patients in their 80s and 90s who've had iPads, and they've had Nooks and Kindles, and they, shop online. They're on Facebook. They want to do it all. They just, sometimes they need someone to, buy the tablet for them or get them a laptop and show them how to turn it on. But once they're into it, they love it. They love seeing people. And they're just like us. They're just older. Yeah. And Robin got an old doctor to tweet read with her about a year ago. This book of hers.
I think you guys are all making the case that we need end of life social media doulas, right? You just need someone to help you guide you through the use of these complex tools, so that because I gotta imagine I don't expect Blab to be building this UI that we're seeing all around us here specifically for the older generation, but I could totally see somebody being entrepreneurial and kind of building a business around trying to help people use these tools and guiding them through it. Like, anyway, there's
an entrepreneurial brain there.
There you go. It's the marketing entrepreneurial brain.
Yeah.
But, I think there's something to it. I mean, if you read the studies and look at the stats, there has never been any proof to an age bias in social media. I think there's an age bias in the platforms in terms of mobile phone versus laptops versus tablets and things. But in terms of I think we all want to connect, and the best tools for that are Facebook and Twitter and these social tools. And it's just a matter of getting over that learning hump because the icons are small, the terminology is confusing. But I think once they do get the hang of it, I think you're right, Nancy. They would love it. I mean, they love to connect with old friends, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna. It's 11. It's almost 11.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna need to sign off. I've got a surgeon's appointment in the morning, and I've got to.
Oh no.
Drive.
Well.
So I better leave us. But anyway, thank you again for the opportunity. And next time, I'm hoping I see you again, all again, until the end instead of this green screen that I'm looking at.
Yes, thank you, Robin. We very much appreciate you, Robin. You're great.
Thank you. You're great too. Love you all. Okay.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
How this works.
Yeah, we're gonna have who else is gonna step in now? This is exciting to see who's gonna take the seat next. It was only a couple weeks ago, Jimmy, that I started using Periscope because of you and Chuck. Now I'm on to Blab. You guys are super accelerating my social media learning now.
Well, it's Chuck's fault. He's the one who got me periscoping and then blabbing, so I'm going to blame him.
I mean, this is how bad I got. I was actually watching Chuck when he was doing his tour through DC, and sitting down at the cafe with his wife and everything. I was actually fascinated by watching what was happening with him. Anyway. Now I'm kind of...
Yeah, no, he's got some great scopes. I tell you, he's really gifted at doing that. So I'm going to... Robin, are you still here? I'm going to close her out. So I don't think she could kick herself out because she was frozen. So hopefully I didn't kick her out too early there. So if anybody else wants to jump on, go right ahead.
Amazing.
But yeah, this medium, though... Colin, I tell you, I really like Periscope, but this is really so cool in terms of, I feel like I'm on the Jetsons, It's just so futuristic. It's really a neat way to connect. And I like Twitter, but there's a whole different dimension with this medium than Twitter. You can see some of the body language. Audio is really a cool way to connect, I think. It's just a little unique and quite a bit different. And I like the 4-in-1. So, with Periscope, it's more unidimensional. This has, yes. So this is just, I think it has a lot more potential for doing these kinds of interactions, I think.
I agree. I mean, this is unique. Look, as a sports fan, this reminds me of Around the Horn, right? You got the 4 things going on the screen. You got 4 people talking and debating certain topics. I think I'm liking this one quite a bit. I think if you got 4 people on here who are having a really good debate, it would be very fascinating to watch.
Well, I think I'm getting poor internet signal, so I may, if you guys don't mind, I might go ahead and end this blab. Is that okay from your perspective?
That's good. Hey, Jimmy, it was great to see you. Nancy, it was great to see you in real life.
Right. Thank you.
But if you had any closing thoughts, go right ahead. But I thought you guys, my internet signal, I think, is getting messed up because I can't see. I can hear you both, but if you guys had any closing thoughts, go right ahead, and then I'll close up afterwards.
Thank you for hosting. Would be my final thought here. Thanks a lot, Jimmy, for doing that.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you both, and hopefully, maybe try this again next week. We'll see. Or have someone else host it. So I think it'll be kind of fun to add to the chat, the tweet chat.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.